Hey everybody, welcome to Composers at Home, Maybe Drinking Coffee. Uh, I am your host, Elliot Miles McKinley. I can even put my name down there. Let me stop the hold music for one moment. Yeah, there I am. Welcome to our June episode of Composers at Home, Maybe Drinking Coffee. I hope everybody is doing well tonight, wherever you are tuning in, or if you're watching this on a replay, wherever that happens to be. Um, Facebook, in its infinite wisdom, has created a new producer thing for its videos. I just found this out about 20 minutes ago, so I'm not really sure that I like it. They put the comments over to another spot, and they did this. So um, our mileage may vary, but please let us know how things are out in the cyberverse as far as like the stream or audio, all the other usual things. Everything here is reporting well, reporting with thumbs up. So, you know, these things do happen. Anyway, it's beautiful weather here in Boston. It's June and it's almost summer. It's quite literally almost summer. It's a few days away. So I would be remiss in not giving you the usual social media plug. So please subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the video, click the little bell icon, like the page over on Facebook if you like what you see, and want to check out more episodes in the future. I'm not really sure what season 4. Happens to be the last episode of season 3, and uh, it's been kind of an interesting journey over the last, I guess, 15 months of more or less doing this. And I'm going to try to do some different things starting towards the end of the summer and the fall. So I'll do some other live interviews, maybe do some more focused things on music. I'm cogitating over some different ways of moving forward. So anyway, but uh, I with me tonight for my final guest of season 3 of Composers at Home Maybe Drinking Coffee is someone I've known for a number of years. I don't know if we want to do the math together, but when we start talking, you probably figure out how many years we've known each other. He's a fine composer, and he's a polymath of sorts. He likes a lot of different things, including Esperanto. It was the first time I ever figured that out, what Esperanto was by meeting David, who's my guest tonight, David Gaines, and a lot of other things. And He also happens to be one of the regular viewers of this show, so it's kind of funny. I think he was watching the show since it almost started, and he's almost always watching one of the episodes if he's not otherwise disposed. So now he gets the honor of essentially being on the virtual other side of the table as a guest. So I think that says enough. I'm going to bring David into our conversation and switch over the scene to the converse. There is David. He's wearing purple, and I know why he's wearing purple. It's an ongoing joke. David, how are you tonight?
That's purple's my brand.
Purple is your brand, I know.
Um,
Northwestern, I know.
yeah.
You can cheer if you want. I'm not
Alma
going to do.
mater, praise be thine. May thy name forever shine.
So,
I'm
man,
good.
you're good, good.
Yeah, I can see
Um,
you're doing well.
I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, I can, as I often say to people that I have on the show, or uh, either publicly or privately, I can say that I can complain a lot about my first world job, but I have a first world job, so I'm quite lucky, and I'm quite lucky to be at the position I am in life right now. So yeah,
You
thank
are a
thank you.
distinguished professor of music.
Thank you.
Tenured,
I'm
tenured.
tenured.
Yes.
Distinguished might be another qualifier, but I'm tenured, right? It's funny when I first got tenure, and my first day of classes, I don't know. I was drinking coffee, and I said something to one of my the group of students that have known me for a while, and I said, "I'm tenured. I can say anything I want."
Pretty
I mean,
much.
pretty much. I mean, there are limits, of course. Anyway, David, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show, and I also want to thank you for being a regular viewer. I mean, I never sometimes know who might be watching, but pretty reliably I can count on you watching, at least if not live, at least you're watching the replay or popping on for part of it and commenting on a composer's piece of music or something that we're talking about. And I really appreciate that. There are a handful of people that I know that try to watch the show on a regular basis, and you're one of them who almost always chimes in. So first of all, thank you for that. Um,
Of course. Well, we all have to, as composers, we have to support each other, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, if we don't have a community, we really are islands of ourselves, onto ourselves. And as you know, and other composers who are watching, when we create our music, we really are solitary, creatures in that, intimate creation process.
Yep.
But I think what a lot of people don't realize is that composers also need friends too. so so we like to
It
build
helps.
community, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a pretty small community,
Sadly.
all told. Yeah, sadly. And so we do, like you said, we do have to support each other in this endeavor. So anyway, I will say to everyone watching, whoever's watching, say hello. Even if you don't have any questions or comments, please say hello. Let us know that you're watching. It's always good. I mean, speaking of which, David is not watching, so he can't say hello. He's saying hello right now, but to all the other Davids in the cyberspace, please say hello. Let us know that you're watching and that everything is, I think, more or less going okay. I have to switch.
Ask questions,
Ask
please.
questions, yes. If anything, we like questions. My guests like questions. I like questions. It also helps us. It helps us actually. It helps us to
So
focus our
rapport,
conversation.
there's
Yeah,
no fourth wall here.
right, right. There may be many multi-dimensional walls, but there's no fourth wall. So anyway, I am using. I'm drinking out of my composers at home. Maybe drinking coffee mug.
Very nice.
Very nice. These are, if anybody wants one of these, just let me know. I can set you up with a mug.
Well,
Um,
it'll hook you up.
I will hook you up with a mug. Yeah. So great. Let's see. Nancy Cluvo Millman says,
Oh boy. Hi,
"Synth,
Nancy.
synth" is the comment.
Long story. That's my nickname.
Oh, oh, really? I've just
Yeah.
learned something new about you, and I've known you for many years.
22 to be exact.
22. Okay, you are going to do math. James Ryan pops in and says, Jim Ryan here, a DC Esperanto friend of Dave's for many years.
Saluton.
So I think it's, yeah, everybody please pop in and say, keep saying hello. Uh, so what I usually start with, and David, you know the kind of the protocol of the show. But what I always think is really interesting, even for people who don't know who you are, who might be watching this at some point, either live or later, is a little bit about what brought you to music. So, you know, like, what were some of your first musical recollections, and do you remember when music sort of attracted you in a way that perhaps maybe other things did not?
Yeah. In fact, I knew you would ask this, so I spent a lot of time thinking about it. When I was a kid, I was a baseball player and I was pretty good at it, and that's what I focused on. And then in junior high school, out of nowhere, the band director, well, I'm going to give a shout out to Dwayne Cantor, band director, Turner River Junior High School, Stamford, Connecticut.
Hmm.
He sent out, because he was smart, he sent out all these slips to different kids all over the junior high school who he thought would be good at learning an instrument. And he scheduled the interviews, and I remember this all these years later. He scheduled this in 10-minute intervals. And I can't remember anything, but I remember that he scheduled my interview for 3:20 in the afternoon on one of those little scissor cut slips of paper. And until that, it never even occurred to me. I had played violin briefly in elementary school at the level where they put masking tape on the fingerboard.
Oh, right.
And my
Right.
mother made me quit, and she was very upset about that years later, long after my career started. And I said, Mom, why didn't you play the violin anymore? I said, Mom, you made me quit. And she was so upset about that. I said, but it doesn't matter, because everything went into the direction it was supposed to go in.
Right.
It was definitely not supposed to
Go
in
there.
the violin direction.
Right.
Exactly. So I showed up for this little interview, and I'm going to make this, I've told the story so many times, so I'm going to make it real short. He took me to the band, you know what a band closet is.
Yep.
And filled with cases, and way in the back was black and dusty, and its handle was broken off, and it was shaped kind of wedge shaped like a coffin. The first thing I thought when I looked at it was it looked like a small coffin.
Mm-hmm.
It was very odd. So I said, what's that? And he said, that's a baritone. And I didn't know what a baritone was. So, okay. I mean, he could have answered anything and it wouldn't have mattered.
Right.
So he pulled it out and had this canvas strap around it, and it was pathetic. And he opened it up, and the instrument itself was super pathetic. And I wanted to play it, and that was it. So the rest is history. Basically, he was a bassoon player, gave me a couple of lessons, and I just took to it. And I was in the band.
Yeah.
And then I decided this is it. So that's what's the baritone, as you know, is also the same thing as a euphonium. So the other esoteric thing with which I'm often associated.
For, right. Yeah.
But prior to that, my parents both had taken classical music courses in college, and they were music literate. My mother had sheet music all over the place. We had tons of sheet music, and she played the piano, and there's no doubt that had an influence. But specifically, I remember also my dad, who had tons of classical music recordings from the 50s. He had the Jascha Heifetz Mendelssohn Violin Concerto recording. And that I look for opportunities to use this word. I used to filch it and sneak it upstairs. And the only record player outside my dad's den was one of those little, I don't know if you're old enough to remember, the little tiny, you couldn't even call them turntables, record players that had the plastic cover and the handle. You could carry it over to your friend's house.
The
Remember
little,
those?
and they came in different colors.
Yeah, and they had a little 45 adapter with it.
Yep. I remember those.
So I then, after stealing my dad's record player, I would sneak into my sister's room, she's probably hearing this story for the first time. And I would play this magnificent recording on this piece of crap record player, where the speaker was inside the record player, and you had to do one of these maneuvers to hear it.
Yeah.
And I heard scratchy, tinny, not even AM quality. Jascha Heifetz, da 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 da. And this that's to this day the only violin concerto whose main theme I can hum, because I played it so many times. So I remember being floored by the Jascha Heifetz performing the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto. So that, and then that just kept cooking away in the back of my head. And then when the local high school band director, Bruce Monroe, who's still my friend all these years later, he took the local high school band, Rippleham High School, where I eventually went. He took that band to the local junior highs, now called middle schools. They were called junior high.
Right, as I remember.
And another thing that clearly I remember, the time he came to Turner River, and it to this day is the one, I don't know if I've told you this story. And Bruce, if you're watching, you know how much I appreciate this, that you did this. He walked off the podium, and he's snapping his fingers, and he still conducting, but walking inside through the band. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like in
Mm-hmm.
front of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, they obviously that's not something that they would approve of you doing
Right.
at the Peabody conducting
Right.
seminar.
That's kind of, they don't, that's, I don't know.
That's a
That's
no-no.
a, you're
But
right.
it
Right.
was to a whatever 12, 13-year-old kid. That was
Mm-hmm.
the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And he got back up on the podium. And of course, what they were playing, they don't play the Hindemith Symphony for band. They're playing stuff that
Yeah.
appeals
Yeah.
to teenagers.
Yeah.
And I was digging it. And I thought, that guy is so cool. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
That was in 1975.
Okay.
So 46 years later,
Yeah. Yeah.
here I am.
Here you are.
But those were the
Those were some of the
the
formative, like,
things that,
moments that stood out or stand out still in your
yeah,
mind,
that
right?
got me rolling.
Right. Right.
Because my mother played the piano. My dad still knows. In fact, to this day, he probably knows more about the
Mm.
standard violin concerto repertoire than I do.
Mm.
But there's nothing that would have predicted. I mean, John Corigliano, his father was New York Philharmonic concertmaster, right?
Right. Right.
If I remember right. And
Yeah,
your
something,
dad,
yeah.
people who are watching, Elliot's dad, William Thomas McKinley, is one of the top rank all-time American composers.
Thank you, man.
So you had that going for you. And
I did.
I had to
did.
kind of I was given the
Well,
basics with my parents' classical music
Yeah.
background, but
Yeah.
they certainly didn't expect that one of their children would follow this
Path kind of to its logical conclusion. Right. Right.
some sort of conclusion.
Speaking of the the wall of accolades that's behind you, that's what I meant by logical conclusion. I don't know if you want to.
That's my brag wall.
Yeah, the brag wall, which means that we get to call David Doctor. So that's Dr. Gaines, not just Mr. Gaines. So I would say, first of all, like, your path is not dissimilar to many who go into music, because it is not supremely common. It's not uncommon, but it's not common that someone has parents or a family that's of professional musicians, where one could, sort of like in the old days of, like, if your father was a blacksmith, you would become one, or something like this, where it would be
Right.
that sort of thing. It's not a common thing. I mean, I actually, and this, I didn't know I wanted to be a musician, really. I mean, music was always in me, but I didn't find that until much, much later. I mean, when I was 12 or 13, like when you were playing in band, I didn't play anything. I quit playing the trumpet because I hated practicing. And I got my first record player, and I was getting into jazz. Like, that's when I discovered, like,
Right.
discovered Miles Davis and jazz, and like, oh my God, what is this? And even though my dad played it, it was kind of funny. I had to go my own route to find it. And I didn't really find it until much, much later. I wanted to be an astronomer or a meteorologist, so.
Well, that's kind of the path that was, again, like you, I mean, I didn't realize it. And then,
Mm-hmm.
so it's not like both my parents played in the New York Philharmonic, and I started piano when I was 5 years old, and
Right.
playing concertos when I was
Avery
7.
Avery Fisher Hall was your
Yeah.
playground, Yeah, right.
Well, it was, but as an audience member.
Yeah, I know. Right.
So I had to do, I mean, through high school, through college,
Mhm.
I had
Mm-hmm.
people supported me, but
Yeah.
basically I was on my own, and I had to carve all that out. And I'm
Mhm.
still doing that.
Mhm.
I've just become used to doing that, just
Yeah.
finding my own way.
Finding your own path. Yeah. So
Yeah.
what? All right. So now I'm going to ask the follow-up to that question is, and by the way, I want to give some acknowledgement to a couple more people that have popped in and said hello. Let's see. We've got Ralph Dumaine.
Ralph Dumaine. Hi, Ralph.
Yeah, Ralph is watching till 8. He says, I'm watching till 8. Ralph, thank you for watching until 8.
You can watch the rest later.
You can watch the rest later. It'll be on tape delay. And then we have Michael Roth. Hi, Michael.
Michael.
He's watching too. Michael's another one of the regular audience members who was also on the show, as you remember from last fall. And we had Michael on as
Yes.
I think
Oh, yeah.
Michael was my first guest on season 3. I can't remember now. I'm losing track of all of this, but or maybe first guest of season 2. Anyway, so let's see, who else do we have here? We've got John Gilly. Hi John. John is a friend of mine from Canada. He's actually a fellow um, amateur astronomer, and he's not a musician, but he has found the this show that I do through Facebook, and finds it really interesting listening to artists and composers talking, and so he's become kind of a regular listener as a layperson, and he's also just a really fantastic guy. And because of COVID, I haven't been able to see John for a couple years. So, John, we miss you at Cherry Springs. Get it all together and come back and see us. Kevin Millard says, "Hey, David."
Oh, that
Um,
is so cool. Hi, Kevin. Kevin used to play with Moraine. And Jim DeJoie and Alicia. You met them in Bratislava.
oh yeah,
I
right.
wrote the baritone sax concerto for Jim.
Okay.
Kevin, they play in Moraine, that instrumental experimental group out in Seattle. Kevin was their bass player and then moved to
Hmm.
Arizona. Correct me if I'm wrong. But very cool that you're here. Nice to see you, Kevin.
Yeah. Thank you for watching, everybody. Again, keep saying hello. We like that, even if you don't have any questions. Um, all right. So then my next logical follow-up question is, okay, so now here you are, you're attracted to this instrument. I mean, actually, to be fair, a lot of kids play baritone horn in band. I mean, it's a common instrument that's played in band, as
Yeah, but
as
here,
opposed to tuba or something like
right.
this, right? I mean, in fact, I even messed around in baritone a little bit because, it's sort of like a big trumpet, but I mean, without being sort of stupid about it. Um, but uh, again, you're attracted to the instrument, right? You're
Well,
attracted.
here's the difference. First of all, baritone euphonium, I use the terms interchangeable,
Hmm.
is essentially a band instrument.
Hmm.
It makes its appearance in a few orchestral scores,
Right.
but it's basically band instrument. So, and this is extremely important because that was my instrument. My background was 75% wind band,
Wind
wind
music. Yeah.
ensemble,
Right.
brass quintets,
Hmm.
and so I picked up the bass trombone specifically to get orchestral experience,
Right.
but I was focused on the
Wow.
baritone, which, by the way, this is the only instrument that changes its name when you go to college. When you're in junior high and high school, the charts you're reading all say baritone.
Yes.
And then suddenly you go to college and all your parts say euphonium,
And you're
which is,
wondering, do I have the same instrument?
I'm
You-
looking for, there
Where's
are
the baritone part? Yeah.
a handful of scores that have parts for baritone horn and
Right.
euphonium,
Right.
but that's a whole other issue. But in
Right.
any
Right.
event, it takes some getting used to. But the
Yeah.
point I was going to make was that baritone or euphonium at that level, and even in college, really,
Hmm.
it's an instrument people don't gravitate to. They don't want to play the baritone. It's like the alto clarinet of the brass section.
Oh, right. Yeah.
They grab some trombone player and make him play.
Right.
So
If they're covering some part or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
you mentioned trumpets. Sometimes I'm not sure why they get trumpet players to do it because
The
it's a
embouchure is
completely,
very different. I remember
the
it
mouthpiece
was
is
like,
totally different.
yeah.
But that's common, and that's why you see in band parts you'll see baritone bass clef and baritone treble clef, and the
Hmm.
treble clef part is transposed,
It's
and
it's
that
for it's
accommodates.
for
It
trumpet
makes it
players that
easy.
it's for trumpet players that can't read bass clef,
It's
basically.
for these lame,
Yes.
I have to say, lame fifth chair trumpet
Yeah.
players to
Yeah.
accommodate them.
Right.
So
In other words, the level that I was at in high school. Right.
excellent.
Right. Like,
But
oh, Elliot can do that. It's like
so
four notes.
I'm the guy who that was my instrument. And I like the fact that, yeah, there were other people in Stamford, Connecticut who played
Hmm. Hmm.
the euphonium, but
Hmm.
they were either conscripts or just played not particularly seriously.
Right.
They just happened to end up on that instrument.
Right. Right.
And then a year later, they were going to give it up or whatever.
Right.
But so I was the euphonium guy in Southwestern Connecticut.
Everybody knew
And
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I
Right.
was I was principal euphonium for 2 years in
Hmm.
the Connecticut All-State Band. So I mean, I took it really seriously, and I was really good at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't. If I were to play it, trumpet, flute, there's just loads of competition.
Yeah.
And I,
Yeah.
from an early age, 13, 14, 15 years old, I liked being,
A
I
specialist.
liked big fish, small pond instead of
Yeah.
the other way
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's very true. Like, I don't think, no, there wasn't. I can say this now unequivocally, unless there's a friend of mine from high school who will refute my claim. But there wasn't anybody who was exclusively. I mean, there were a lot of kids that played baritone euphonium in the band, but they weren't like, oh, that's the part for that person. Like that person is
Right.
the baritone player, right? It was kind of one of those
Well, when you get
auxiliary
to
instruments.
it's the high school level, and even if you're at a college, um, like the South, the Midwest, where
Hmm.
marching bands are really big, you'll have 5, 6, 7, 8
Right.
euphoniums.
Right.
But they're, in almost all cases, um, like what I was describing, like
Right.
trombone
Trombone
players who are
players.
doubling, or trumpet players who are
Yeah.
doubling.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then when I went to college, I was the guy, and I had an amazingly good audition. I was super nervous, and I don't know, somebody was pushing my fingers, but it was a brilliant audition. And then Northwestern, you probably are aware of this. Depending on what a music school's needs are, it's like the football team.
Yeah.
One year the football team needs a tight end. The next year they really need a couple of wide receivers or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And music is like that too. And that the timing was right. And that year, Northwestern School of Music really needed a good euphonium player.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a great audition. So I got a big scholarship.
Yeah.
They threw a big financial aid package
towards you. Yeah.
and there were guys who played euphonium.
Mm-hmm.
There were several bands,
Mm-hmm.
like all Midwestern universities,
Mhm.
several bands.
Mm-hmm.
But here's another story. And actually, my sophomore year, a graduate student showed up who was actually getting a master's degree in euphonium performance. And he and I were the euphonium players. So, but in those days, you remember those long punch cards you feed into the
Oh yeah. The computer punch cards. I mean, I know what
and
they
that's
are.
how we
Yeah.
But that's back in the late 70s, 80s. That's how we registered for classes. So you would go to a room or a gymnasium where all these mostly elderly volunteers would sit behind folding tables and pour through the boxes and hand you the card.
Right.
So you have to take applied instrument for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And Northwestern has, you could see it in the college catalog, applied euphonium. So, and of course you have to explain that to everybody. So I walk up and I hand over my schedule, and I see the box with all that, and you could see that the violin, first of all, there's tons of violin cards.
Right.
And they're all greasy and stained because they've been used so many times.
A million times.
And then she looks in the box with trombone, tuba, and they're mostly, not in bad shape. The tuba cards are in really good shape. And then she's looking, and she pulls out this crisp, brand spanking new, and it says euphonium, applied euphonium at the top. And she had this like gobsmacked look on her face, and she handed it to me, and she had this big smile, and she said, "Wow, I've never pulled out one of these before." And I'm thinking, that's a big surprise.
Right. Wow. There you go. Yeah. Right.
So
that's funny.
That was because I was the guy. I was it.
Right.
But I like that. Like I said, I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't have to compete for first chair or whatever.
Right.
It wasn't like the chair.
You weren't one of 100 violinists all trying to fight for a position.
No, it's like being the contrabassoonist, and that's the instrument you want to focus on.
Right.
In the orchestra.
So I guess the next thing I'm going to ask is, what drew you to the world of composition? Going from your background and going into
Well, I kind of,
Northwestern as a as a performance major,
I
or did you go
actually,
in as a or did you go in as a double?
no, I think Northwestern, like I think most, if not all music schools do this. It's based on the liberal arts model. Freshman, sophomore, you don't major. You pick your
Hmm.
major at the end of your sophomore year. So you have the musician, you know what a musicianship sequence is.
Yep, yep, absolutely.
So we
I
have
teach it.
musicianship. Yeah, exactly. Musicianship one, freshman year,
Hmm.
ear training, oral skills, music theory, and musicianship two, sophomore year. And then you declare. And at Northwestern at that time, they didn't have an official music history major. So you had a choice of uh, applied performance, um, music education, or theory and composition. And
Okay,
if I remember right, I think those were the three.
those are the three. Okay.
And I came in because for the lowercase f Facebook, that they, for you young folks, there actually used to be literal Facebooks, and I still have mine that they mailed you the summer before your freshman year. And it had photos of all the people entering college that year with if you can believe it, your home address.
It was, yeah, yeah.
So
So if you're complaining about Facebook mining your data,
yeah,
yeah.
so under your name and address, they asked you to fill in what you were going to major in. So I just
Hmm.
so it says to this day, it says in there music education. But by the time I was a sophomore, that's not really what I wanted to focus on. And for a couple of different reasons I'm not going to go into, I got disillusioned with the instrumental program there, and I actually stopped playing euphonium.
Hmm.
So I I was during my freshman year not particularly happy overall. I'm just thinking of transferring.
Hmm.
And to make another long story short, I was told about what was brand new then. In fact, I was the first Northwestern student to do this. 5 year, so you spend an extra year, a fifth year, and you get 2 bachelor's degrees and a Bachelor of Arts in addition to Bachelor of Music. So I was worried about my dad, having to pay for 5th year and
Hmm.
even discounting. He was all over it. He loved it. He said, so if I remember right, I think he said something like, so you'll be getting a real degree on top of
Yeah, on top of
your
this music degree. Yeah, right.
Bachelor of Music.
Yeah,
So
right.
I got 2 bachelor's degrees in 5 years, and that's what got me to stay at Northwestern, because I was interested in a whole bunch of. You can't really, my experience in any event, freshman year was and sophomore year, I couldn't really talk to people who wanted to spend all day long in practice rooms
Hmm.
about
Right,
current events, politics,
right,
language, you know what I
right,
mean? And
right,
that was starting to really bug me.
right.
So that double degree program is what got me
Hmm.
to stay.
Hmm.
So I stopped playing the euphonium and spent the last year and a half of college in the College of Arts and Sciences. Actually, I majored in philosophy.
Okay.
And by default, I ended up majoring in theory and composition
Hmm.
and decided to give it a whirl. And it's funny because the 1983, the first completed composition from me in the Northwestern composition program was a duet for flute and euphonium, which is to this day has been played all over the world and is one of my most performed compositions.
One,
But again,
yeah.
I want to make a point here that I've always been concerned throughout all these decades with practicality, and in
Hmm.
particular at Peabody, the Peabody Conservatory, where I got my doctorate. This aspect of music was hammered into me. Practicality, write for the instruments you have available to you.
Right.
That was one of the precepts that was pounded into me.
Hmm.
So at that time, there was somebody I went to high school I was enamored of. She played the flute. So
Isn't that
I
always the
wanted to write,
way?
yeah, there's a lot of
I got a
that in the
lot of I got a
musical.
lot of music over there for
Right.
people I no longer talk to.
Well, and then later at Peabody, I
Yeah.
wrote a flute and tuba duet for
Hmm.
a woman who was with me in the doctoral program. She was a flute doctor candidate.
Hmm.
And her boyfriend at the time was a tuba player. So, and they subsequently split up, but their relationship produced another very often performed
Duet.
composition.
Yeah. Well, you know,
So, but I have the flute and euphonium duet market pretty much
but
cornered.
you're the guy, just like you're the
I'm the
euphonium
guy.
guy of, Connecticut,
Well, and
Southwest
that's the thing.
Connecticut. Right.
Again, big fish, small pond. And what
Right.
I have told people occasionally over the years is the world really doesn't need, and certainly is not screaming for, a David Gaines string quartet.
Well, you never
So
know. I
you
mean,
never know,
for
but
some reason, I keep pushing that button, and I don't know if the world's screaming for string quartet number 9 coming out of me,
well, I
but
like yours, and you have a facility for that, but I don't. And um, so write what you know, write for what you have
mm,
available. And although to that point, when I was at American University getting my master's degree, the Tokyo String Quartet was in residence there. And each semester
they
they
do
did a master
readings.
class for, they did
Yeah,
readings for,
yeah.
so I actually have a string quartet that was cobbled together from the things I wrote each
Right.
semester for the Tokyo String Quartet. But
Hmm.
again, that's an example of, here's this
Right,
opportunity,
right for
take
what
advantage of
you,
it,
yeah, yeah, right.
right for what's
Yeah.
handed to you, basically.
So, before we play some music, which I would like to get to some music, so we can talk about David Gaines, the composer. Um, all right, so you kind of, I don't want to say stumbled into theory comp, but that just kind of
Kind of.
became, well, I mean, uh, but what prompted you to keep going in composition? Like, besides writing a
Well,
piece that, I mean, was there a moment when you realized that you were a composer? I mean, maybe above all else, or did that ever, like, was there some music that you heard or were aware of that just really sparked the interest in you to go that way?
when I finished that duet, and there's a couple other small things that I
Mm-hmm.
don't really, that haven't seen the light of day, but
Mm-hmm.
um, when I finished that, I sort of transferred, I guess, I left the euphonium behind, not permanently, but
Mm-hmm.
regularly,
Mm-hmm.
and then switched to composition. And at that point, when I was actively writing, and yeah, I thought of myself as a composer. And I first, my first teacher was M. William Carlins. I don't know if that name rings a bell.
Carl,
He
I
was,
know the name. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, well-known Chicago guy,
yeah, yeah,
taught at Northwestern for years and years.
yeah.
And he, to his credit, Northwestern at that time, like every university music school, was really strict, 12 tone,
Yeah.
avant-garde,
Yep.
all that stuff. What I used to call
Mm-hmm.
the bleep and
Right.
blorp
Kind of
stuff.
hammer the octaves right out of you.
Well, stuff a lot of, if not most of the people listening to us right now are have no interest in. So, and that wasn't me. So I was writing, in fact, when you hear that flute and euphonium duet, it's, even though that one of the movements is actually a 12-tone row, but I specifically
Worked it
organized it so
out.
it wouldn't
Right.
sound like one.
Right.
But so I was definitely on the conservative side, and but being a composer of that bent, I mean, I wasn't interested in writing 19th century waltzes either, but
Mm-hmm.
I was solid because I grew up on band music, brass music,
Mm-hmm.
Hindemith,
Mm-hmm.
Copland, Stravinsky,
Mm-hmm.
neoclassical,
Mm-hmm.
Walter Piston,
Mm-hmm.
Alan Hofanis, the mid 20th century crew.
Mm-hmm.
That was where my head was at. And but so Carlin's, bless his heart, he just let me do my
Your
thing
thing. Okay.
at a
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
when that, and nobody else, none of the other students. So I wasn't hanging out with composition people because we didn't see eye to eye musically.
Right. Right.
But I was a legit composer, and I started to think, yeah, I might be good at this.
Yeah.
And then I got into the electronic music studio at Northwestern, which was, I had a small Moog synthesizer at home that
Mm-hmm.
I was really interested in that side of music.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the electronic music studio at Northwestern, really, it was like a playground.
Yeah.
Well, it
Yeah.
wasn't like one, it was one, really. And
Mm-hmm.
we had the classic Moog modular synthesizer that even people who are watching this who aren't musicians, they probably know what that is. It
Right.
looks
Right.
like a telephone operator
Yeah.
switchboard.
Yeah. Yeah. With all the
Well, you know
patch
how that
cords.
goes,
I
and
know how
that's
that
where I learned how
goes.
to manipulate that. And that,
Right.
the director of that studio, Steven Siverud, who said he'd be watching tonight. Hi, Dr. Siverud. he wants me to call him Steve, but I'm sorry, he's
Yeah,
always
I
going to be
know how
Dr.
that is.
Siveru.
Yeah. Yeah. Once it's baked in, it's hard to get out of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so Dr. Siveru was my second composition teacher, and also, bless his heart also, because he has a completely different style than I do. But
Hmm.
he let me do my thing also.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um, that was the start.
And then you went to American University next,
When
right?
I didn't, I went back home after college, and then after about a year, realized, wait, I need to go back to school. It was one of those light bulb
Yeah,
moments,
like
that
like
go
what am
off
I
over your
doing
head.
here? Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, not, yeah, kind of, but mostly it was like I had a revelation that I knew exactly what I needed to do, because I
Hmm.
wasn't confident as a composer. I didn't have a support network. I wasn't writing.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, and that getting into AU is a whole long story, but that
Yeah.
I went to AU because they gave me a free ride. I had an
Hmm.
assistantship. I got
Hmm.
into a bunch of Stony Brook, SUNY Stony Brook. I got
Hmm.
in there. I got
Hmm.
into Syracuse,
Uh-huh.
no assistantships. So, and I didn't want to take out more loans. So
Yeah. Yeah.
off, I'd never heard of American University. I certainly didn't know anything about their performing arts department.
Hmm.
So that's kind of a weird musical situation to drag yourself into.
Yeah.
And there I went. So Jerzy Sapievsky was my teacher
Hmm.
there. He's a
Hmm.
well-known DC area
Hmm.
composer.
Hmm.
And that he was a great teacher. So that's where I wrote my euphonium concerto for orchestra, which was, there were only one or two that had ever been written at that time.
Hmm.
So that was my master's thesis.
Hmm.
And then same thing, a couple of years went by, no support network, no confidence, wasn't writing anything.
Yeah.
And just was convinced by a friend of mine who went to Peabody, and he changed my life by emailing me and telling me, Dave, you should apply to Peabody. They have lots of financial aid. That's exactly what he said,
Okay.
verbatim. So then I
Okay.
changed my mind, because I didn't want to
Yeah, to
take out
take out more
loans.
loans. Yeah, right.
And then I decided, and it never occurred to me to apply to Peabody. I mean, Peabody.
Hmm.
I'm not applying to Juilliard. I'm not applying to Peabody. What are you talking about? He changed my mind.
Okay.
So, and I decided, if it takes going into debt to get a doctorate from Peabody, I'll do it. And that's what I did.
Hmm. And
And that changed everything, because
yeah.
Peabody, everything there is like I said before, practicality,
Yeah.
performance, get your
Yeah.
stuff performed.
Yeah.
They had orchestral reading sessions.
Yeah. Right.
I
Right.
lived on, actually, they had a graduate floor on their dorm on campus. So I lived there for 2 years,
Hmm.
met performers, conductors,
Yep.
people that I'm friends
Yeah.
with to this day.
Yeah.
And that community, that's what really makes you a
Yeah.
composer,
Absolutely.
validates
Right.
you.
Right.
You
Right.
see what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's uh, something I tell a lot of younger composers uh, who are relatively new to things is that you're who you one of the reasons to go to school at all is, sure you can learn something, but it's also meeting the people around you and developing those
Right.
connections. And I still have, from undergrad and grad school, people who are friends of mine from back then, used to drink beer with or whatever, and now are, they're professional musicians and they,
And
they play my music. So,
that's one of the sadly lost things over the past year, because
hmm.
I've I've created and taught courses online. I know how online college level teaching works,
Hmm.
but you can't replace, and it's perfectly legit, but it's different.
Yes,
You
it's very
cannot
different
replace
experience. Yeah.
meeting people, and
Yeah.
particularly in college, that's true. But in a music environment, when you're a composer and you have to how this works. You have to essentially beg people, even your friends, to play your music. So it's nice to have people there in front of you to beg.
Right.
And usually they'll say yes.
Yeah, right, right. After a few beers, yes
It
becomes
helps.
yeah, it helps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, anyway, yeah, the networking is one of the most important things. And
Yeah.
and
I
I
cannot overemphasize it.
and I also tell people this, and I know that you would concur, is that networking, there's a difference between sort of uh, um, authentic genuine connections and inauthentic, disingenuous connections, right? And so, when we say that, if anybody's watching, we're not saying, you know, go and try to force a friendship with like the best violinist in your program. No, I mean, actually, it's way better to be friends first with somebody who might not be the best performer in the universe, but actually likes you as a person and therefore is going to play your music way better than somebody who might, be have more technical prowess but won't give you the time of day.
Or
And
would be genuinely willing to help you in other ways or
yeah,
introduce you to people who are the
right,
best players.
right. There's so many, right, and that, you know, friends first, music and career second when it
I
comes to
was
that.
saying this exact same thing to, I do mentoring for Northwestern University.
Hmm.
Um, and they connected me with I think she was a fifth year senior. Super, I saw a video of her, super good soprano.
Mm-hmm.
And she's got her head screwed on straight. She's got career objectives.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave her, the usual mentoring
Mm-hmm.
advice.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it was that I said, I told her my Peabody story, and the biggest thing I took away from Peabody was the networking and the friendships and the partnerships that developed. So I said, make friends. And I said it exactly the way that you just did, but don't be manipulative
Right. Don't
about
don't
it.
don't
Don't be
right.
evil about it.
Right.
When you make a
Right.
friend, be genuine
Like be a
about
friend.
it. Right.
Like if you need them to, like, if you need to give them a ride to the airport at 5 in the morning, like do that because you're a
Well, the
friend,
thing
because
is,
you
at Northwestern, I spent a lot of time. Northwestern, for the most of the time, that was very lonely for me because I had interests, as you know, most
yeah.
other
In
people
other
don't
words, you
share.
were, yeah, I know that too.
but
Musicians
but
tend to get a little bit, the blinders go on and it's sort of like, what?
but
There's other
beyond
stuff?
beyond that, it's just I was not as assertive about engaging with other. I wasn't in any study groups, for example.
Okay.
So, and that changed at Peabody, and that was a
Mm-hmm.
big influence on my career thinking. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was more than happy to pass that along in mentoring. And if you do any mentoring, definitely bring that up.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, why don't we, again, folks, ask questions, anything of David, anything that we're talking about, anything that might resonate if you are hearing anything that we say that makes sense, or ask us questions if it doesn't make any sense. Um, but why don't we break the ice with some music? I've got three things queued up. What do you what would you, where would you like to go first? What should we spin first?
Uh, let's start with, let's go in order of accessibility. this this piece that I wrote for soprano and piano,
Mm-hmm.
you know which one, yeah. And I'm working on a couple of choral songs on Esperanto texts for the World Congress of Esperanto, which was, I was supposed to have done this a long time ago. The World Congress of Esperanto in 2020 was supposed to be in Montreal. Well, 2020 happened,
Right.
and that got postponed till 2022. So at some point towards the end of this year, I think I'll start working in earnest on those two compositions. The texts are, because it's Montreal, Quebec, there's a very famous, up there anyway, famous Quebecois poet named Émile Nelligan.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of his most well-known poems have been translated into Esperanto. So the folks up there wanted me to use those as text for choral songs. So as prep for that, and for those of you who aren't composers, frequently when we, and I know Elliot understands this, when frequently, not always, but frequently when we start a project, we do preparation for it. And that could involve sketching. It could involve doing a smaller piece. To get, for example, if you're writing for instruments you're not all that confident about or familiar with, you might want to do a piece for that instrument and piano before you do the big concerto. In my case, I'm working on a third symphony, and everything that I'm doing around this time is all prep for the Third Symphony.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
in any event, so preparatory for the choral pieces with Esperanto text, I wanted to do a smaller piece for voice piano, Esperanto text. So I met this another fantastic, so she's a lyric coloratura soprano. I'm going to say her name. This is going to embarrass her, but this is going to help her career. And you should know her because her singing is out of this world. Her name is Stacy Frost. She's at the University of Denver's Lamont School of Music.
Okay. Yeah.
And so she's doing a bunch of recitals. And so this is a recital, written as a recital piece for her to sing next year. It's a poem that the guys, Dr. Zamenhof, who created Esperanto. I like to work with, and this is another thing I learned at Peabody, texts that are in the public domain. Really, you don't have to worry about copyrights. You don't have to talk to lawyers. You just use it. So I love using stuff, creaky, dusty Esperanto text from the late 19th, early 20th century for just that reason, practicality.
Yeah.
So it's an early poem that Zamenhof wrote to demonstrate the utility of Esperanto.
Huh?
And musically, it's just a simple, I don't know if you heard it before the show, but it's the simplest pentatonic scale you could get. And that scale's used over and over and over throughout the piece. So it has this exotic quality to it that's from the pentatonic scale. And the demo is a flute. So you're going to hear a flute and piano version.
In place of the voice. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Great. All right. Well, why don't we spin this? I'm going to switch over to the music view, and we'll meet up after we check it out. Okay. Well, of course, YouTube came up with suggested videos, but I'm going to go back to some music here. Let me pause that for a second. Um, just so we have some music, and we have us. The Talking Heads have appeared. Um, yeah, the funny thing is that, and this also might give us a chance to talk a little bit about your love of Esperanto, and this is a good gateway for that. Um, because this piece is in Esperanto. And I was struck by the fact that, um, well, I've always been struck by this fact about Esperanto, first of all, that a lot of the words you can guess what they are. Because if you know enough about, if you have enough of a Latin background, like if you've got some familiarity with Latin roots and things of this nature, a lot of the words will be like, oh, that's probably, you know, that means
Well,
core
he
means
designed
hard.
it. He designed it that way
Yeah,
deliberately.
right,
That's
right,
one of the things that makes it easy to learn.
right. So, first of all, uh, it's a very beautiful little piece, and I checked it out once just to make sure that I got audio and it worked. So but I didn't listen to it critically. And I mean, um, it's it's as you pointed out, it's fairly straightforward, and I know some of your other music, and so this kind of has a clarity to it, almost like filtered water does, but like in a good way. I don't mean that in any kind of you know what I'm talking about. I
No, I
think
know
yeah,
exactly what you're
you
talking about.
know, and so yeah, I think it's going to sound great with when you get it, when you have it with a singer, and in a live performance or recorded environment, so uh so first of all, what drew you to the world of Esperanto, since we're on that?
Well, it's kind of like music, which I often tell people when the career subject comes up. You don't choose music; music chooses you.
Right.
And I know you can identify with that.
Hmm.
And nobody chooses to speak Esperanto. Esperanto comes along and grabs you
Yeah.
and won't let go, whether you want it to or not.
Yeah.
So when I was growing up, I spoke Hebrew. I went to several years of Hebrew
Hmm.
school.
Hmm.
My brother and I went to b'nai, not a bar, b'nai mitzvah,
Ah.
and b'nai is the plural of bar.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, um, so in preparation for that, you have to study Hebrew, and I mean, if you do it right, and there was no way we were going to half-ass this, not in my family. So we took Hebrew lessons really seriously, and when you're introduced to something like that, whether it's a language or a musical instrument or anything else,
Hmm.
you discover fairly quickly if you're really suited for
Yeah.
it. And I mean, if you really are, that becomes you just like a magnet.
Hmm.
So it became clear to me that I had a facility for
Excuse
languages,
me.
and not everybody does.
Hmm.
So, and there are certainly plenty of things in life I'm not suited for, but I had a facility for languages that made itself apparent pretty early on when I was studying Hebrew, which is a tough language. So then I took Spanish in junior high, and that my dad had studied Spanish. So, and my brother was
Hmm.
already, I think, taking French. So I decided to do Spanish. And Spanish compared to Hebrew, Spanish is a walk in the park.
Right.
And his Spanish, oddly enough, is not as phonetic as Esperanto, but not all that far away. Spanish is pretty phonetic, so it's pretty easy
Hmm.
to learn how to speak the language if you're adept at
Kind of
phone,
being able to phonemes. Yeah. Right.
acquiring phonemes and the building blocks of
Right.
language, which I
Right.
was. So
Right.
I was always several lessons ahead of the class. So I
Hmm.
just picked it up.
Hmm.
So, and then around that time, I was spending every weekend in the Stanford Public Library, and I would go
Hmm.
through the language section. I just thought it was fascinating.
Hmm.
Wow, you could, and the Teach Yourself series was really big back then. So the main branch of the Stanford Library had Teach Yourself everything. Teach yourself Urdu, teach yourself Dutch. I remember more than once I came home with piles. I didn't, I didn't do more than just open up and look at most of them. But I was fascinated by the idea that you could teach yourself all these languages
Right.
if you
Right.
wanted to.
Right. Right.
So, in the course of all that, they had one book in the middle of all this sea of language books, Esperanto, the World Interlanguage, and Ralph and Jim, I'm sure know what that book is, by George Allen Kahn, who was way back, decades ago, a big American Esperantist.
Mhm.
So I took that book home, and I'd never heard of Esperanto. I'm sitting there reading this thing. This is so cool. This is awesome. I was
You're
like
just,
fascinated by it.
yeah.
And to teach yourself, I mean, when we say you could teach, if you have a facility for languages, that you can teach yourself enough Esperanto in an hour to have a
Right,
conversation.
right,
This is not an exaggeration.
right.
It's true. So I'm reading the book, and it's like the movie Phenomenon with John Travolta, where all he has to do is look. There's a kid who only speaks Portuguese, who has a heart problem or an appendix or something, and he's this genius character that John Travolta plays. They know that he can learn anything at sight, so they run to the library and get a Portuguese book. And on the car ride to this kid's house, he's flipping pages of this Portuguese book, and when you get to the house, he starts asking the kid medical questions in Portuguese.
Yeah,
And this woman who's standing there watching this is just, she goes, "You learned the entire Portuguese language on the ride over here?" And he goes, "Well, not all of it." That's kind of, that's a hyperbolic example of,
yeah,
if you are into languages and you have a facility for it,
right.
when you get through one of these self-teaching Esperanto books, you can start conversing with people.
Right.
It's that
It's
easy.
that
I was
easy.
so
Yeah,
fascinated by that. And then the whole movement behind it.
yeah.
There's
Hmm.
a whole historical movement
Hmm.
to get people to talk to each other on an equal basis, which is the
Right,
big thing.
right,
Because
right.
everybody speaks English, but English gives certain cultures a big advantage and puts other cultures at a disadvantage.
Hmm.
So when I'm with Esperanto people from other countries, which I've done all over the world,
Hmm.
I like the fact that I don't have to force them to speak English, which in many cases is embarrassing for them because they don't speak it very well. And they don't,
Yeah, yeah.
like us, if we're trying to speak a foreign language, you
Right,
don't necessarily want to put that on display in front of a
right,
native speaker. A lot of people are shy about that. And that's
right,
perfectly understandable.
right.
But this puts us on an equal footing. So I
Yeah,
found that fascinating. And then, of
yeah.
course, keep in mind my big fish, small pond theory. When I
Yeah.
was at Peabody, I knew the day, I didn't start work on it for another 4
Uh-huh,
years, but the day
uh-huh.
I arrived at Peabody, I knew my doctoral dissertation is going to be a symphony with Esperanto. There's no question about it.
Right, that was
And
the,
that I was even more determined to do that when I looked and found that no one had ever done that before, and no one has done it since. It's
right,
the only one ever composed.
right, right.
How about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, that makes you, as one of
I
my,
may have a crappy place in music history, but
but you've got
that,
a unique one, right?
right.
The it reminds me of a statement that a friend of mine, composer Mark Applebaum, said. You know, I don't know if you know Mark Applebaum, but he's a composer, Stanford, uh, quirky sort of electroacoustic composer. And he likes a lot of different things. He plays piano, is like jazz piano, but he also writes, crazy music, but also builds instruments. And he built this instrument called I think it was called the Mouseketeer, and it was like this table of like doorknobs and bells and things, and he would run it through like an effects processor. And he was saying once, he said, well, I built this because I can claim that I'm the world's best Mouseketeer player, right?
Who is
But then he said, but by logical extension, I'm also the world's worst
you want to
Mouseketeer
look at it that
player.
way?
Yeah,
Harry Parch, who probably not a name anybody watching this knows, but you know who Harry
yeah,
Parch
yeah. Of
is.
course.
Yeah,
Yeah,
invented, and he made his place in music history with instruments he invented.
yeah. Right, right.
So
A whole
I
whole
like that.
plethora. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, I didn't set out to be weird deliberately,
Sure, sure. It was just an
but
interest
this
of
is all
yours.
part. I took an interest that I had, and
Hmm.
like I said, I did not want to get involved with this dog eat dog ruthless
Yeah.
competition to get string quartets to play my stuff. I wasn't
Right.
interested in that.
Right. Right.
So I followed this path that was, and also a doctoral in research fields, as you
Mm-hmm.
know, a doctoral dissertation is supposed to contribute original knowledge to
Mm-hmm.
humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And this was my way of doing that.
Of contributing that knowledge. Yeah. Well, and I remember that piece very well. We can. I don't know if you want.
Yes,
I don't know if that's our next piece to play. I'm
we
gonna
can do that.
I'm gonna
But I want
switch to
to,
interview mode for 1 second.
okay,
No, I'm only doing that because
got it,
I
got it.
can set up the
Well, I
next
want to
thing.
explain for people who don't watching who don't know you. The way I know you is the way I met you was from your dad's was not just a composer, but he had that record label that
Yep, in the
my first
90s.
album came
Yep.
out on, and that's how we met. And you were the producer
Yeah.
for those recording
For those
sessions,
sessions. Yeah,
those historic
the
sessions in the Czech
the
Republic.
historic David Gaines year 2000 sessions, October of 2000. October? Yeah, October. Um, James Ryan chimes in here and says, let's see, he goes, that book was my introduction to Esperanto too. And
Cool.
then he
Yeah, a
says,
lot of people.
I had the same experience, same reactions and experiences, I think, related to your Esperanto story, and said there are also Esperanto rock songs.
Oh, tons.
Yeah, yeah.
Way more. You see, back in those days, you knew the prominent people in the United States who were Esperantists,
Hmm.
everybody knew who they were. It was a small community. Now, once the internet exploded, forget it. I can't, no one can possibly keep up with everything going on in
Right, right,
Esperanto culture.
right,
There are
right.
record labels that put out, there's one in France that puts out regularly whole albums of Esperanto folk music, pop music,
Hmm.
rock music.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I'm trying to get other composers, but
Right. It's
haven't succeeded so far.
the, I haven't done it, but that doesn't mean that I won't. I just haven't. So let's. I think we'll play the movement from the symphony next, and this will again
All right.
locate you and me in time and space. Um, so like you said,
Well,
I
let me set the scene for that.
sure.
This is the second movement.
Yep.
Um, I remastered this album in 2013. You probably know, I wasn't all that thrilled with the recording sessions because the time was so tight. Without, I'm not going to go into any detail about this, but you remember that the
I
sessions
remember.
didn't go all that well,
I remember.
but well enough to produce releasable recordings. But in addition to a couple of other technical points, everything was way too slow
Hmm.
because that was how they could. A lot of the music in the symphony is difficult. They had no rehearsal time, et cetera, et cetera. However, through the magic of somebody figured out how to break the laws of physics and speed up, slow down tempos without
Without
changing the
changing the
pitch.
pitch. Yeah.
I don't know how they do it. I don't want to know how they do it. All I know is that you can do it. And I was so excited that this was made available. I was determined to remaster that recording myself.
Hmm.
So I taught
Hmm.
myself CD mastering,
Hmm.
and I did there were tons of sections where not just, some had to be slowed down a little bit actually, but
Hmm.
most, like the second movement that was so slow on the original. And
Hmm.
those of you watching, the original album is on Spotify, YouTube, whatever. You can make your own comparison. But this movement in particular needed to be really snappy and quick.
Yep.
And now it is. So I was really happy about that. So this is the second movement
The
from
second
the
movement.
Esperanto, Symphony Number One,
Symphony Number
Esperanto
One,
Symphony.
Esperanto. Yeah, let's listen to that first, and then you and I can tell some more stories.
Okay.
Which we have many. But yeah, let's check
Dude,
this out. I'll switch to the view here. I get to turn pages, so
good luck.
yeah. Thank you. So here we go. We'll meet back after the conclusion of the second movement.
Oh, this is,
Oh,
yeah, just
go
so
ahead.
people know,
Yeah.
this is the shortest movement of the symphony. The three selections you're going to hear tonight are all quite, in classical music terms, extremely short. I didn't want
Hmm.
anybody sitting through 18 minutes of tedium. So all of the excerpts, your compositions, excerpts, whatever that you're going to hear tonight are on the short side.
Okay, cool.
And
All
this
right.
is about 4
This
minutes
is
long.
about 4 minutes. Okay, here we go. This is movement number 2 from Symphony Number 1, Esperanto. And there you go.
I always like that ending, even the
Yep,
original version.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. It brings back memories. Um, and I forgot about that little fugue section in here. And I think the funny
Yeah.
part was that because the tempo was so slow, it 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 didn't sound. I mean,
I
it didn't
let
sound
me tell you
fuguey.
something. When I used Audacity, which you're probably familiar with,
Sure, yeah.
and to do this part of the remastering, and when that exact section that you're talking about, the kind of thing that Hindemith does so well, these string fugues
Mm-hmm.
that I'm still a rank amateur at. But at the proper tempo, you
Sounds,
nailed it.
yeah,
It's like, wow, where did this come from?
like it's a
That's my
fugue,
favorite
right?
section of the
Yeah,
movie.
yeah, it's fun because I like the fact that you've got the voice drops out and then you get this sort of fugue that builds up the texture
Right.
and then I also forgot about the tenor sax part. I remember
Oh yeah,
now,
yeah. Isn't that
you
sweet? And
know, and it
there's,
comes out like a solo.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the other things I do as a composer, I like to integrate concert band wind ensemble instrumentation with an orchestra. And I'm
Hmm.
puzzled that more composers don't do that. All of my orchestral scores, I think all of them in the past, definitely going forward,
Hmm.
will always have a euphonium, alto sax, tenor sax, and an expanded percussion section.
Right, right.
So it just brings up, I mean, to give one example, the euphonium makes a great bed, like a base for the horn section.
Yeah, because
Now,
of the way it
maybe,
blends, because it's a
yeah,
softer blend than
right. Like you can't
trombones.
really use a bass trombone to do that,
Right,
but a
right,
euphonium works.
right.
And there was also, you mentioned that tenor sax solo, there was also in the middle of that movement, this sweet, tiny little euphonium solo, which of course I couldn't resist putting
Of
it.
course, it's your signature.
Right.
um, but yeah, well, first of all, it's nice to hear the music at the tempo that it was originally
Exactly.
intended, right?
Oh, when that fugue section with the strings, this is what I meant to say. When I put it into Audacity, increased the tempo, and then played it back, I had tears going down my
Because you
face
heard
for
the music as you
exactly the
remembered
way
it.
it was supposed to be
Yeah,
played.
yeah.
And instead of funeral dirge like, which I mentioned to you
Did it,
earlier,
did
it
it,
sounds like
did
they're
did
actually
it, did
enjoying
it, did it,
it
did
sounds like they're
yeah, right.
enjoying playing it, which
Yeah,
makes a
right,
huge difference.
right, right. Um, yeah. So yeah, so David and I spent what was it, about 1 week there in Olomouc,
At
a
least,
few
yeah.
days in Prague to start, a train ride, a few days in Olomouc, and that actually, well, there is a connection to Zamenhof, right? There's a in the city of
Well,
Olomouc.
the original cover of that, I'm glad you mentioned that. The original version of this album, the cover, which my mother didn't like because she said it looked like a ham. It's
It's in that park. There's a
it's in a
park.
park in
Yeah,
Olomouc, the
yeah,
city in Moravia. For those who don't know, the Czech Republic is Bohemia to the east and Moravia or I'm sorry, yeah,
yeah.
I'm
You're
sorry,
right. Bohemia
Bohemia to the west,
to the west, northwest,
Moravia
and
to the
Moravia to the,
east.
yeah.
Yeah, and Bohemia is famous. I'm oversimplifying mightily here. Bohemia famous for beer, and Moravia more famous for wine. A lot of great wine
A
in
lot of,
Moravia.
especially the white wine, the
Yes.
Frankovka or something.
So
Frankovka, yeah.
Olomouc is one of the prominent cities of
Hmm.
Moravia, the
Hmm.
western part of Czech Republic.
Hmm.
And I was told by the Esperantists there's an Esperanto monument in a park. And I thought, well, I got to see
Got to go there.
this.
Yeah.
So yeah, the day before the recording session or 2 days, something like that, I was with my Olomouc Esperanto friend who
Yeah.
was guiding me
I
around.
remember
And he
that
showed
too.
me, yeah, I don't think you got to see it because
No,
I don't
I
think you
didn't
were
see,
with
because
us.
I wasn't. Well, I think we were doing some other recording or something, but I didn't get to go with
Right.
you. But
We walked through this like it was one of these things like, where are you taking me? And
hmm
he said, turn around. And I turn around and there's this, what I can not stop thinking about now is a ham, this big stone
the
ham
Ham Monument.
with text chiseled into
Monument.
it, and that had faded away because it was many decades old,
Yeah.
but still legible in Esperanto.
Yeah.
There's a monument, and there are many of these types of monuments across the world, but
Yeah.
mainly in a lot of them in Eastern Europe,
Yeah. Yeah.
to Esperanto or to Zamenhof. So I saw this and I took a picture and I said, that has to be the
Has
cover
to
of
be
the
in there.
album.
Yeah. Yeah. So I actually also remember you speaking to a number of people in the Czech Republic
Mhm.
who spoke, and you guys conversed freely. To your point earlier about that sort of equalizing platform.
Well,
of
these are people who
Esperanto.
not just were afraid to speak English, people who do not speak
Speak
English
English.
at
They
all.
spoke Czech or
Some of
Esperanto
them
or Russian.
they speak Czech. Some can also speak, depending on their age
Right.
range. A lot of them speak German. Some can
Right.
speak Russian.
Right.
And I was hanging out with the
And you were
Esperanto
hanging
people
with the
who all
Esperanto
speak it
crew. Yeah.
fluently.
Right. And so
And there was, I think, also some wasn't there an Esperantist at the recording session? I think there was some translating.
Yeah, some translating. I think because the conductor didn't know, what some of these words were, and the orchestra, they didn't know the language, right? So you needed some some cues, if you will. But yeah, so we did that, and we had
So
some.
I did my part for Czech United States diplomatic relations.
Yes,
Put it that way.
yes, and we ate some good food, and we drank a lot of good beer.
Yeah, we drank a lot.
We drank a lot.
Well, I mean,
This was a
that
few
the
years
recording,
ago.
I don't, I don't mind saying publicly that it was difficult. A lot, what professional musician hasn't been through a difficult recording session?
Yeah.
And we had the concert that night.
Yes, we
That, in fact, that was the main reason I chose that orchestra, because the package included the
they included a concert.
performance,
Yeah, right. They
which your
wanted.
dad's record label always did.
Hmm.
And that performance was a triumph. That was amazing. That was one of the highlights of my life. And there were Esperantists who came to that concert. It was the premiere,
Yes, I
world premiere of the
remember
symphony.
that.
They came from all
All
over
over.
Eastern Europe. One
Yeah.
guy took an overnight train from Germany to be there.
And people have
Kimball
to.
Wheeler, when it was over, she held the score above her head.
Yes, I remember that. I remember that.
Standing ovation.
Was it? And then we. Oh God, I'm sorry because I'm laughing because there's some anecdotes that happened. I think it was it
Be
after.
careful. Be
Was it
very careful.
was it after that we went to the Moravian restaurant?
Yeah, it was after the triumph. Yeah, I think I know where you're going. We should probably move on.
Anyway.
Interesting things happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry,
But it was a great,
I'm
I
laughing.
mean,
It was fun. No, I mean, by the way, when David says that, it's not that nothing weird happened. It was fun and a lot and very funny, and actually probably mostly a lot very funny for the two of us.
yeah, and
if
when
you're not
people
there.
were drinking, it's the kind of thing the rest of the world
Yeah.
doesn't need to know. That.
Yeah.
Let's just leave it where it happened.
Right.
What
right.
happens in Olomouc at the Moravian
Kind of
restaurant
Moravian
stays at the Moravian
Moravian
restaurant.
restaurant. Followed by a car ride to
Oh yeah.
Prague afterwards. Anyway.
Well, I was so determined to bring back memories. I had a small mini disc recorder that I was recording practically every conversation
and
Elliot and I had.
We well, first of all, I also remember trying to find a store in Olomouc that sold blank mini discs. Because you had recorded so much material, I think you ran out of discs, and did we find some? We found a store that had some, I think, if I remember.
Could be. But
anyway,
that technology, which was at that time, 20.
That was 24-bit, right? Wasn't that a 24-bit recorder?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was. I mean, I still have applications in what I do outside of composition where. I mean, I have a mini disc deck downstairs. I have that same portable pocket-sized recorder that I had with you. I still use them.
And you had a good mic. I
bought a stereo mic just for that trip.
I was really fascinated with the technology, and I was kind of almost.
I was introduced to it by Karen Amrine, who you know.
Yep.
She was a big tech head. She introduced me to all kinds of technology, and still to this day, probably most people who aren't audio people don't know what mini discs are, but back then, 22 or so years ago, that was a great way to do remote recording.
So if it was basically, I guess to sort of just very quickly tell people what that is, it's essentially they look like CDs, but they're smaller. David had there. Yep, that's it. That's a mini disc. So it has the advantages of a CD in the sense that unlike a tape, it's indexable. It's
totally, you don't need to put it on a computer, which in those days was a really big deal. You could do all the basic editing functions there on the machine. Plus, you could fit two handfuls of these in your pocket. You can't fit a CD in your pocket. And now, fast forward 20 plus years, I mean, everything's digital. Recording is all done.
It's all done on a hard drive,
directly digital, or not even. Solid state recording.
Right, solid state drives. Yeah.
But like I said, I mean, I still have uses for this.
Yeah, and it was really, and I remember being wowed by the fact when you told me it was 24-bit, because at that time 16-bit was an audio standard. It was considered to be the high res standard. At that time, we were recording. If you remember, everything was going to DAT. It was being laid down on DAT.
I never used DAT. I was confused by DAT.
Yeah, well, DAT was,
digital audio.
You could do 24-bit on DAT, but everything was 1644, 44.1.
But again, a DAT was a digital audio tape was roughly the size of a VHS video cassette. The big thing about mini discs
Was the
was the
portability.
portability.
Yeah.
They're tiny, and yes, it's compressed audio, but it's for especially for casual purposes, basically indistinguishable from the original.
Yeah.
So it had a number of advantages
It
for
did.
that little
Yeah.
window of time
That it was
when lots of
something.
people
Yeah.
were using
Right.
it. Right.
And you documented much of the shenanigans.
Well, we had
Our,
things were stressful, so that was fun. You know, the way we blew off steam the rest of this trip was getting goofy. And you
and
know, when I need to pick me up, I go downstairs to the big, what I call the big Kahuna, my Sirius stereo system,
right.
which with a mini disc is part of it, a deck, mini disc deck, and I blow the dust off those discs
Those old
from
discs.
Olamets
Yeah.
and pop them in and listen
Yeah.
to you and me cutting up.
Did did you ever just a total side note to make a note of this? I
Mhm.
I can't remember this. Did you digitize those and share those with me at one time?
I did.
Okay, you got to send me that link again. I think I downloaded it. If
Dude,
you
don't make me.
don't
It
make
looks
me
like
don't make me
I'm
come
gonna
over
have
there.
to. I'm gonna have to do that whole process. It's like 2 hours of
You don't have the
streaming audio.
files? Anyway, all right, we'll talk about that
I
later.
probably do,
You
but
probably have the
yeah,
files. Yeah, anyway. It's
I'll set you up. I'll set you up.
okay, okay, because that was that the little blast from the past. And so James chimes in and says, home chores are calling me away now, so I have to leave. Just want to say that Esperanto, which is beautiful music itself, inspired a wonderful friend to create more beautiful music and still more to come.
Very nice. Thank you, man.
Thank you, and thank you for watching, James. Thank you. So well, we have one more piece in the queue, in the hopper, and this was around the time that around the last time that you and I actually physically were in the same space together, which was about 12 years ago now.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but I remember, I do remember this performance coming about. You called me. I'll never forget when you called me to tell me that you got this performance of this piece, which you'll set up. It's your concerto, your trombone concerto. And and I was in a Meijer shopping, and I remember I was walking around with the cell phone, and you were asking me a bunch of questions about I forget the details you needed, but anyway, I just remember you being all excited about this performance that came about. So why don't you set it up yourself? Because it's more
Well,
interesting than me being in a Meijer shopping.
at first I thought you said Elmira.
No, I was in Richmond, Indiana, but I was in a grocery store
Got
when
it.
you called
Got it.
me. I weirdly remember that.
Well, this came about when Robert Kozanek, who's the principal trombone of the Czech Philharmonic Orchestra and a super nice guy, he was the guy who recorded that little minute-long piece for euphonium and piano that went on the Conversations album that you were producing, and also the baritone sax concerto that I wrote for Jim Dujois. So he loved that piece, and he came up to me afterwards and mentioned that the conservatory that he went to was going to celebrate its 60th anniversary. He's one of their prominent alumni, so they wanted him to perform at the weekend-long celebration. And would I write him a concerto? Now, that's technically a yes or no question, but who's going to answer no?
Right.
So Robert Kozanek asked me to write a trombone concerto. That was so cool. So obviously I was excited. And again, with thinking practically, my experience with orchestral readings at Peabody has always gotten me to focus on performability. And that's one reason why in spots, yeah, it can be complex, but overall my music is definitely not the most complex out there. And the main reason for that is I got tired of hearing crappy performances because I don't care who you are, you're not going to get nearly enough rehearsals for whatever music you write.
And that's absolutely
right?
true. Yeah.
So I started writing with that in mind. And the big lesson for me in terms of that when I was at Peabody was one of my colleagues there who's in the master's degree program. And these orchestral reading sessions, you know how it goes. It's like union. You got the clock on the wall.
Right.
You got to get everybody's music in. There's no time to waste. And this particular composer had unusual notation that they had to stop and explain some of the notation to the players. And that's just the absolute kiss of death. He wasted precious minutes on not them recording his music, but trying to figure out how to read it.
Right.
And I never forgot, I felt sorry for the guy, but the lesson I learned was, yeah, write whatever music you were moved to write, but you have to take responsibility out in the real world for the type of music that moves you. If you write the type of music that only the Arditi String Quartet can play, you better hope that the Arditi String Quartet is going to play it.
Yeah,
right?
you better hope that
your friends.
they're your friends,
right.
and
Because
will care to
otherwise
play
you're
it.
just going to get a bunch of crappy performances.
Right.
And that I just got tired of that.
Right.
So I always decided to write to the occasion. In this case, student orchestra, right? Virtuoso soloist. What's the environment? Well, that's in this particular case, that's the monkey wrench, because as you'll see in the video, this is the Archbishop's Castle in Kroměříž, Czech Republic, which, by the way, in this room, it looks beautiful, sounds terrible.
Yeah,
because
well, a lot of these rooms are horribly acoustic.
Super reverberant. There isn't a soft surface anywhere. All right angles. The ceilings are 1,000 feet high, so it's kind of, most of it sounds like this. But it's so beautiful, you give it a pass.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize the venue when I was writing the piece. You see. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So in any event, I had all these considerations in mind. I knew they were going to have limited rehearsals. I didn't want to embarrass him by a piece that wouldn't sound excellent. So I wanted to be a limited orchestra. I wanted to use Hoffanis, or I don't know if you're familiar with Alan Hoffanis's Metal Symphony.
I've heard it, but I'm not super
16 or 17. But in any event, he was commissioned by the American Metallurgical Society to write a composition for their national convention. So he wrote for all metal instruments. So what I did, it's not an outstanding composition, but the instrumentation is what's interesting about it. So what I did is I wrote for orchestra of strings, flutes, trombones, metal percussion. That's it.
Okay.
No clarinets, no bassoons.
Right.
Flutes, trombone, and also I like the idea of what Stravinsky did with the Soldier's Tale. One high instrument and one low instrument.
Right. To kind of get the best mix.
To cover all the bases in a very superficial way.
Yeah.
So flutes, trombones, timpani, glockenspiel. I love metallic percussion instruments. And that's the instrumentation. So it sounds very bright, which is exacerbated by this heavily reverberant atmosphere. And because he's Robert Kozanek, it was funny, his comment to me when he got the score was, I thought I had made it kind of tricky, but it wasn't, he didn't think, it wasn't nearly as difficult as he wanted it. So I'm actually still working on a piano reduction, so I may throw in a few extra notes.
Extra notes, right.
So what you're going to hear is the finale, the fourth movement, which actually he said was the most difficult of all. And it does have some virtuoso elements to it. So, and I think I reminded you when I sent this to you, it's kind of embarrassing because half this video is applause. So the movement itself is only about 4.5 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll fade. We'll do an appropriate fade out.
You don't have to play all
7 minutes and 35 seconds. Right. Anyway, okay. Well, I'll flip over to the view, so we can. And it's a beautiful hall here, which I've been in many of these kinds of halls. And
well, this is Robert Kozanek, principal trombone of the Czech Philharmonic.
Okay. And
with his father Victor conducting, and it is the P.J. Vavinovsky Conservatory Symphony Orchestra.
Very cool. All right, well, let's check this out, and we'll come back in a few minutes.
Robert plays the euphonium. That's how we met. So I had to stick in a slow third movement where he switches to euphonium. In fact, if you look, you can see, since you're holding this up on the screen,
Mm-hmm.
over on the edge of far left edge of the stage, you can see his euphonium sitting there.
Oh yeah. I was actually noticed that earlier, and I was wondering if
He switches for the third movement, which
got
I
it.
was debating whether or not to put that in, and then I thought, nah, I don't want to over euphonium these
Oh,
poor people.
over euphone.
So
Uh,
so that was a fun trip. I was given, big toast, bunch of flowers, the key to the
the
city.
key to the town of Chromiosis. Yeah.
Really, really nice visit. You know how much I like the Czech Republic.
Yeah. I always enjoy going back to to that area of the world and spending time there.
Fantastic musicianship.
Yeah. I mean, even like you said, I mean, it's even like a high school youth orchestra sounds great.
Mhm.
Like it doesn't, it's like you said, the musicianship is really at an incredibly
Oh,
high level.
this orchestra, student orchestra of the Vavinovsky Conservatoire, it's hard to tell from this video, but I mean, I saw them rehearse. I got to know this orchestra pretty well.
Hmm.
They are easily the equivalent of like C-level regional orchestras.
Right.
Like if you would like,
Yeah.
where do you teach? In Rhode Island?
Yeah. I teach in Rhode Island, Bristol, Rhode
Yeah.
Island.
So if they're like professional or semi-professional orchestras
Yeah.
out in the
Yeah.
Boston suburbs, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Right. There's like,
They're
whatever, the
easily the
Melrose
equivalent of that.
Symphony or something. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was really impressed with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well, great. I mean, it's a nice piece, and it definitely shows off his chops, like you said. Really, really does service. Like the nice sort of long cadenza.
Yes.
And he also really took a I like that the he sort of used the reverberant space in a few spots by
Exactly.
by
Remember
letting
the
the notes
point
ring
where
out.
exactly. I was wondering if well, of course you would notice that. But here's something you didn't notice. The very last note, and I didn't know he was going to do this. That's not written. It's what I wrote was an octave lower. And again,
Oh,
I didn't write, I'm not a composer who likes extremes of range
uh-huh.
because with most instruments, I just don't like the way it sounds.
Yeah.
And the other reason is, again, in terms of
Right.
practicability,
Right.
it's
Right.
really difficult to get those notes out and to sound good.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't typically write.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, virtuoso trombone players can play
Can
five,
can
six, seven
scream.
legs
Yeah. Right.
way
Right.
above the treble clef,
Yeah.
but I don't typically write that. But if I had known that after this, he had been playing, all weekend, he played
Mm-hmm.
the other three movements of this concerto.
Mm-hmm.
Could he hit a note like that as the very last note of the piece? If I had known, I would have written it, but I didn't write it. He
Yeah, he
improvised it.
did that. Yeah.
And that's how good he is.
It's the right. Well, it seemed like it was the right note. He should.
It was perfect to end a virtuoso or quasi-virtuoso
Right.
concertos. It was
Right.
the perfect way to end it. I didn't mind at all.
No, and performer's liberty is always great. I'm gonna switch back to the interview view. So anybody want to have any other comments or questions for David and our remaining time together? Please please put them in the chat box. We're still monitoring the chat. I'm still monitoring the chat. Also, if you're watching on a replay and would like to have any questions for David or comments, put them in the comments section of the video, and we'll try to get to your questions and comments. And I will also, if you're interested in more of David's music, I will put links, appropriate links to complete pieces and website and all that kind of stuff in the video description. So if this whetted your appetite for gains, more gains can be had.
Gainsian.
Gains onward. So man, what do you? I mean, I know that the first piece we played actually is from 2021. That's what your that's I normally
It's
ask
a,
what the current project is,
yeah.
right? So that do you have any other things in the project pipeline that
Yeah,
you
I'm
want to
working
share?
right now, working on again, in the corner of the market department, the duet for violin and baritone sax
Okay.
for Jim and
Okay.
Alicia, his wife. So, um, and I like the 5 miniatures that I did, that first piece I wrote at
Mm-hmm.
Northwestern.
Mm-hmm.
I like that concept.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of dig that the Webern approach of less is more.
Mm-hmm.
So, and
Mm-hmm.
writing pieces with each movement, 45 seconds, a minute, and
Mm-hmm.
15 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
That suits me.
Yeah.
So that's what
Yeah.
I'm doing with it. It's going to be 6 little
Little
miniatures for
miniature
violin
pieces.
and baritone sax.
Cool.
And then I'll get to, well, I'm always tinkering with the Third Symphony, but
Mm-hmm.
then the next thing is to start prep work for those two. They're going to be substantial choral pieces
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with that Quebecois
Yeah.
translated into Esperanto for the
Yeah.
text.
Yeah. Do you have any sort of target plans for the Third Symphony in terms of like long range like performative plans or anything like this, or is it just a
Well,
labor of love at this point?
well, it's really what it is it's going to be an homage to the sample library. I'm really focused right now on working with sample libraries.
Mm-hmm.
And
Once again, be speaking of practicality, right? Because I mean,
right.
where's the David Gaines Orchestra sitting right behind you, ready to take a downbeat, right?
Well, it's right here
It's right
inside my
there inside your
laptop.
laptop. That's what yeah,
And
right.
these instruments have, even ones that are not particularly expensive, or in some
Mm-hmm.
cases cost nothing at all,
Mm-hmm.
have gotten to the point where they're particularly wind, string, and percussion instruments,
Yeah, right.
where they're very authentic and very
Mm-hmm.
usable.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be really a piece of electronic music, but the
Okay.
instrument, it'll
Good.
have some synthesizer
Okay.
textures built
Okay.
in, but
Okay.
it's going to be for an orchestra of sample
Yeah.
instruments,
Yeah.
computer instruments, for people who
Sure.
don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you can do things that, for example, with the Vienna Symphonic Library, with slot crossfade, I could introduce, and I've done this already. I like the way it sounds. I put the Vienna Symphonic Library euphonium in one slot and the Vienna Symphonic Library cello in the B slot, and then do a slot. This is where I get super technical. Send a MIDI controller command to crossfade from, that's what slot crossfade,
Mm-hmm.
to, as the euphonium fades out, the cello fades
Fits
in. So
in.
you
Yeah.
have the attack, what we used to do with magnetic tape and razor
Yeah.
blades
Right.
and go home with blood all over our hands, is now done all on the laptop. And so that you hear the attack and sustain portion of the euphonium, and then you hear the
The
part of the sustained
decay
portion of
and
the cello
decay
and the
of the
decay of the cello,
yeah.
and it's
Right.
all smooth. So
Mm-hmm.
the symphony is going to use a lot of that type
Okay.
of thing,
Do
which you obviously can't get a real orchestra doing.
right. Right. I was actually gonna ask you. So, like, conceptually, I mean, you're actually framing Symphony Number Three to be a piece that may never get performed by an orchestra.
Possible. I mean, I was thinking of working with someone to help arrange a performing edition, if you want to think
I
of it
see.
that way.
So you would
But
have an edition that would basically give you all the notes and sounds that with a orchestra that you want,
yeah,
but at
I
the
mean,
same
because of the
time,
nature of how it's going to be, it's not going to be an exact duplication, but
right,
it'll be a, an arrangement, a
right,
performing version of it.
right.
If somebody, I mean, I'm not going to do it unless there's
Yeah, of course. Well,
somebody wants me, if somebody wants to play it, I'll do that.
yeah, sure, sure. Well, I looks like I think the Chicago Symphony is just itching to play a Gaines piece, right? Isn't that
Well,
weren't they
the
calling you the
Esper,
other day?
they haven't so far. I forgot to mention this. I don't know if you know this, but for the 100th anniversary of Zamenhof's death in
Uh-huh.
2017,
Uh-huh.
the orchestra in Bialystok, Poland, where he lived, performed the Esperanto Symphony.
Oh, that's right. I think I
Yeah,
remember seeing you mention that.
that was brilliant, and it made a lie out of Frank Zappa's famous statement that world premiere means last performance, because I've
I
actually
mean,
gotten two performances out of that symphony.
Frank Zappa was sort of uh, the the funny thing about Frank Zappa was that he was both the the epitome of practicality, but also the anti-epitome of practicality. Because
Well,
what it was is that he wrote for musicians that he knew could play what he
right.
wanted to play, but
Yeah.
that was the only group of people that could play that music, and
Oh,
so
yeah. I mean,
you know what I
his
mean?
music is insane, and people
Yeah.
play it, but only top virtuoso
Right. I
players can do
mean,
it.
it's right. So it's kind of like it's both that yeah, I've got five musicians that can play all this music I want them to play, but this might be the only five people or maybe
And
yeah.
go ahead. But
Yeah.
I don't know if you've read his autobiography, but the chapter in it about his experience with the London Symphony Orchestra is hilarious. And he just seemed perpetually baffled and surprised at how all of that worked. And he touches on so many of the things that, some of which I've talked about tonight, and some of
Mhm.
which you've experienced, and most of us contemporary composers have
Mhm.
experienced,
Mhm.
in terms of the practical considerations that go into rehearsing, recording, performing modern music.
Mhm.
And that he just was, he never, he was always kind of a fish out of water in that world. He
Yeah.
never really got how it all worked, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he was such a brilliant musician in his in you know
Oh
in his
yeah,
own,
no,
you
no
know, I mean
question
that
about it.
you know, so it does bring up though something that I've been cogitating over, and it's interesting to hear you talk about this, is the idea of, you know, writing a piece of music. See, just to spool backwards, like you, I like writing pieces of music for friends, and whom I know will play the music.
Right.
And so, you know, usually the pieces that I tend to write are pieces that I know are going to get performed and are most likely going to be performed well, or at least there's going to be a lot of work and effort to make it happen. You know, in you know, to, so that the music can live.
Mm.
But um, but you know, there's stuff that I want to write that isn't necessarily for the group of friends that I happen to have, and I'm very fortunate and lucky to have those friends. But for example, I don't happen to have the Boston Symphony Orchestra in my back pocket. I mean, you know, Anders Nilsson doesn't know that I exist. He doesn't even know that my dad exists, probably. So when is that going to happen? Well, I would love to write an orchestra piece because I love the instrument. I mean, I love the orchestra as a, you know, I love all the great colors and the sounds and everything. But, you know, you made a good point is that now, 2021, last few years, especially, computer processing and sample libraries have gotten to the point where, you know, it used to be that you could still do something of that quality, but it took a lot more processing power. You know, like you had like two computers running and like a
Mhm.
dedicated, you know, hard drive that cost you $1,000 and, you know, all this stuff. And that was the kind of way that people did it even 5 or 10 years ago.
Let me tell you my last year at Northwestern in the electronic and computer music studio.
Hmm.
Talk about punch cards. And I remember this like it happened yesterday. The graduate students were all excited about this project that they had that was finally coming to fruition. And they fed all those punch cards into the giant room-sized computer. And it
Yeah.
was 1983. And we all went home.
Yeah.
And
It was,
then we came back the next morning. The computer had been crunching on these cards all night. And we came back, and in a little alcove with cloth around it to, you know, it's baffling. There was on a stand one loudspeaker, which it was thousands of dollars. That it was a state of the art loudspeaker. One sat there in this alcove in the computer music studio, and we all the, you know, composition majors, computer music grad students, we all gathered around. One of them sat at the giant computer, pressed a button, and out of the loudspeaker came, "Oh." That was it. But it sounded exactly like a trumpet.
yeah.
It was one trumpet tone, and
Mm.
everybody's going, "Yeah!"
Right.
Now,
That was the
I can't. I mean, you. as a composer and a university guy, you understand the excitement of something like that
Right.
nobody in that room had up to that point had ever
Groundbreaking.
heard.
Yes.
And now, uh, 38 years later, it seems so naive and
It seems
ridiculous.
laughable today,
Yeah,
right? But it's,
but now
yeah,
who knows 38 years from now what
yeah,
people,
right, right. Where,
but now we've advanced. The point is we've advanced from having the computer needing to crunch all
right.
night to produce one note that sounded authentic.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, I could tap bing, 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 bing on my laptop right here and play you
And
something,
play
and
that'll sound,
you you would not be able to tell that it's not real instruments.
uh-huh.
That's
Right.
how far we,
Right.
and
How we have.
but in addition, and this is what I'm talking about with my symphony, I'm not interested in doing that as a direct carbon copy of what he.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
more interested in combining that
Right.
with, like what I was talking about with slot crossfading, with things real instruments
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
do. I
Right.
can make instruments
Right.
go out of their
You
range.
can,
I can make
right.
oboes do smooth glissandos. You know what I mean?
Right, 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 right. You can do a lot of things that again are outside. So in other words,
Yeah.
your point is that if you're
And
gonna
I can
go,
just do it. I don't have to wait for him. I don't have to worry that. And this is the other thing that Frank Zappa goes into in his book. I don't have to worry about these players showing up late or skipping rehearsals or paying them.
right,
I can just do
or
it
getting
24 hours a day.
right, right, or yeah, or
And that,
any other number of human things that humans do,
right. And I
right,
find that super appealing, particularly
right.
over this last year when live
When
performances weren't happening anyway.
we were sequestered, yeah, yeah,
So I've spent the last year and a half, I've been spending a lot
yeah,
of time
yeah.
with
And
this
and
technology.
you're not alone. I mean, there's, look, there are many of in our field that are lucky enough to get a lot of live performances, and now that things are coming back, that seems to be picking right back up for the usual suspects. But there are a lot of us, where live performances, or actually what you said about the world premiere, right, as Zappa,
World premiere is
the last,
last
right,
performance.
I personally, and it's through no fault of the performers who do this, but I personally am always disappointed that a piece might only get one performance, maybe two if you're lucky. And I'm like, boy, I've had the fortune of having a few of my quartets be played multiple times, like we're talking about half dozen times, and that is a rare thing, a very rare thing for a contemporary composer, unless you're kind of in that rarefied airspace of a few of us who can have that happen. So as writing music takes a lot of effort. I mean, it's a lot of time and a lot of effort, and we want it to live, we want it to breathe.
Well, that's another thing, and maybe we should close on this note. Two things that I always kept in mind in terms of composition, again, practicality.
Hmm.
One was from Peabody, that Tom Benjamin, who's a great composer, was the head of the music theory department at Peabody for a number
Hmm.
of years.
Hmm.
And I remember him once saying that when the subject of these different styles, and how musical politics is with
Yep.
serialism versus
Versus
tonality,
this,
and et cetera,
that,
et
right?
cetera.
A pissing
And he
contest,
just didn't want to deal with any of that. And
right?
he said, I don't write for other composers. And I now, for me, there's not, if you do, or if you don't care about reaching out to the general public, or
Hmm.
every composer
Hmm.
makes their own
That
decisions
they
regarding that.
fall in that paradigm,
And
right?
I don't have any problem with it, but I'm not anti them. I'm pro Tom Benjamin's take. I don't
Hmm.
write for other composers. I need to make some kind of connection with people, normal people. And that's
Hmm.
the other thing I recall along these lines is a composer, I don't remember his name, but a piece he wrote that was particularly accessible. He said, I wanted to write at least one thing that my mother could listen to. So that's the other thing
Yeah,
I've always remembered.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't dumb down my music. I don't
Hmm.
compromise. It's just
Hmm.
this is how I am most comfortable as a composer. And it just so happens that doing that
Hmm.
tends to create more opportunities for
Sure.
performance.
Sure.
But along those same
Right.
lines, I've really lost interest in doing that because I, I I'm tired of the non-musical aspects that are so aggravating, like
Yeah.
finding performers,
Yeah.
lack of rehearsal time, all that stuff.
Right.
The way
Right.
things are now, and anybody literally can do this who's musical. You get the idea, you work with a computer to create it, you master it, you get it into releasable shape,
Mm-hmm.
you get a distributor to release it, Spotify, YouTube, streaming, blah, blah, blah. Whenever you want, you get up at 3 a.m. and have an idea. By breakfast time, your music
It's
is
out.
ready to go,
It's
it's out
you're
there.
already tweeting and Instagramming it to
That's,
everybody.
to
Right.
me, is, it's not that I don't absolutely 100% don't care about live performance anymore. It's just, I'm not concerned about it. I'm not
Right.
worried about it. I'll take the opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm way more interested. I don't have to wait. Nobody does, to
Right.
get music out to people who would
Right.
definitely be interested in hearing it.
Right. Right.
So that's where
Right.
I'm at.
Yeah. Well, that's a good note to close on. No pun intended. Da 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 da. So, David, man, this was really fun to chat and catch up after a number of years, and after having you be on the audience side of things and commenting and
I
talking.
love your show. I've learned a lot from watching other composers,
Thank you,
and
man.
I hope this community keeps growing.
I hope so too. Again, that was also another reason why I did it. It was because we were all sequestered at home, and it's like, let's let's keep community going. Like, let's keep talking to each other, even though we can't do it, in 3 dimensions.
Right on.
So yeah. So David, thank you so much, man.
Thanks for having me.
And stay safe. And it's funny. I normally close with practice responsible social distancing. Still, I actually kind of like that notion because I didn't get sick at all this past year because I wasn't around anybody to get sick.
Well, and it's
So
funny, people have been commenting that I got a lot fewer colds than I
yeah, I
usually
mean,
get.
like, I don't, it's like, you know what? I think staying away from people is a plus. No, don't get me wrong. I actually like hanging out with people, but anyway, David, thank you so much, man. It was a real
You're
pleasure,
welcome.
and,
Thanks.
and yeah, we'll catch up soon. So, uh,
Thanks everybody for checking this out. I appreciate it.
I'm gonna switch over to the final view here. There I am in solo mode. Um, yeah, that was a real treat. Again, I've known Dave for many years, and it was fun to catch up a little bit and play a few selections. And like I said before, I'm going to put links in the video description. So if you're interested in hearing the whole pieces, for example, of the symphony or the concerto or other things, there'll be links and places to go to David's website and stuff like that to hear more pieces of music. Um, so normally I would promo the next Composers at Home Maybe Drinking Coffee show. We just concluded season 3. I'm cogitating, like I said earlier, about what season 4, the shape of season 4. I'm going to do something, but it might not be exactly in the same format. However, I am going to do some other videos, and one video that I'm going to do coming up, a live stream listening session with just me and hopefully you joining in and chiming in, is going to be this. I've got a few of these listening rooms in the hopper queued up, and the next one is going to be Herbie Hancock's electric piano solos. So this is where we get to sit down together and dig some music, and I play the music, maybe make some commentary as it's going, and we get to talk about it. And so hopefully some people will watch and check out what I think to be are some of Herbie's best electric piano solos. So I'm going to do like a top 10, kind of like a countdown type of thing. So, I'm going to come back. Whoop, there's the stinger again. Also, I would be remiss, but please subscribe and like and all the other usual social media things that one would do to help our channel. I mean, honestly, this does help. As you know, YouTube and Facebook, they're all driven by data analytics. So the more clicks and likes and etc., the more that this stuff can get out to a broader audience. So Anyway, again, thank all of you so much for joining us tonight and checking out some of the music. Um, I'm going to leave you with what would hopefully be a good beginning to your summer. I hope all of you will stay safe. Maybe continue to practice social distancing, responsible social distancing. Get vaccinated. If you haven't gotten vaccinated, take advantage of the fact that we have the modern miracle of vaccinations. And I'm going to tell you right now, and this is just a little aside, I hope all of you realize, whether you're vaccinated or not, that the vaccine that was created for COVID was created in about 90 days from the genome. That is a moonshot. That this will be written about years hence about how fast we were able to deploy this RNA technology to create a vaccine in a time period that normally would take a number of years to actually perfect. So we're thankful. I'm thankful to live in a day and an age where this can actually happen and we can try to get our lives back on track. So anyway, that was my aside. I bid you all a good night, and we'll see you next time in some live stream format. Bye, everybody, for now.